Good afternoon, everyone. I am Christy Oliver, the Professional Development Manager at Davis Publications. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for our 7th session in a series of weekly webinars that happen on Tuesday afternoons through mid-June. Today, we are thrilled to have the authors of Fashion Fundamentals with us. They will discuss conventional and non-conventional material use, key elements of fashion, and share lessons you can use to build a fashion program in your school. A few quick housekeeping things before we get started. We would really love for you to ask questions throughout our time together. The best way to do that is to type your questions into the chat box or use the Q&A button. Both can be found at the bottom of your screen. We'll be monitoring these throughout the session, and we'll get to as many questions as we can through our time together this afternoon. Also, just a reminder that we are recording this session, and after we finish today, a link to the video will be emailed to you and will be available for viewing at davisart.com/free resources for anyone who might like to watch. Now I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. Can I have the next slide? Robin Van de Zand is a professor of art education at Kent State University. Her research focuses design education for pre-K to 12 students. She has been a featured speaker for international, national, and state events. She served on the Education Councils of Falling Water and the National Building Museum in Washington, D.C., as chair of the NAEA Design Interest Group and consultant for the South Carolina Department of Education to produce design state standards. She chaired the International Symposium on Redesigning Education in Florence, Italy, and was a consultant for a learning research project in Chile. She has received numerous local and national awards and honors for design teaching. Terry Giobia is assistant professor and coordinator of the art education undergraduate and graduate programs at West Virginia University in Morgantown, West Virginia. Her research agenda focuses on wearable art and the intersection of practice with theory in the K-12 art curriculum. She is actively involved in the National Art Education Association as a state leader and is currently president of the West Virginia Art Education Association. She holds a PhD in art education from Northern Illinois University and an undergraduate degree in art from the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Education. She has received numerous awards throughout her career for teaching, research, and service. Margie Wachowiak is an associate lecturer at the Fashion School at Kent State University and is the coordinator for the Summer Fashion Academy, a one-week program that introduces high school students to key areas in fashion design and merchandising. Margie earned a Bachelor of Science in Fashion Design from the University of Cincinnati and her Master of Science in Marketing and Communications from Franklin University. Prior to coming to Kent State, she was an industry professional in the global fashion business, working with some of the largest retailers and brands in the United States. As an accomplished business professional, Margie incorporates her real-life experiences into the learning environment. Gretchen Kane is an art teacher at Stowe Monroe Falls High School in Stowe, Ohio, where she has taught for 23 years. She teaches a wide variety of art classes, including fashion design. Gretchen holds both bachelor's and master's degrees in art education from Kent State University. She currently lives in Kent, Ohio with her husband, Sean, and 2 sons, Finn and Gideon. We are really excited to have these wonderful authors with us this afternoon. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Robin. Oh, Robin, you need to unmute.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Christy. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. Talking about fashion is fun because we live with it daily. Well, maybe our priorities have changed as of late. Maybe we're not so fashionable these days. But if we were in our normal routine of going to work or to various events and socializing, we would put emphasis on what we wore for each experience. For instance, why do you wear one kind of outfit to work and a different kind of outfit for special occasions? Why do cultural norms exist that suggest what is appropriate to wear? Why do trends come and go so quickly? I'm sure you all have some answers to these questions, and if we had the time to discuss this, you'd learn even more from each other. because it's fascinating to learn about fashion. And you will find that most students are very interested in fashion also. If nothing else, often their interest lies in making a personal statement. What they choose to wear suggests an identity and what they value as a person. Since there is a great deal of interest in fashion and in teaching or taking fashion classes, we wrote this book as an easy guide on how to set up or build on a fashion course or program. In each chapter, there are studio activities for developing essential skills and unique products using the design process. Students learn fundamental skills in hand or machine sewing techniques, unconventional materials, accessories, careers, and so on. So as you see on this slide, during this session, we're going to cover fashion fundamentals, and we will go over some of the conventional tools and materials and unconventional tools and materials. And Terry and I will talk about those. Then Gretchen is going to talk about some lessons that are included in the book and just give you an overview of those and some insights on her teaching. And then Margie will finish with talking about certain particulars and elements in the fashion industry. Next slide. The budget required to start a fashion class or program does not have to be high. If you do not already have a fashion class or program and plan to propose one, you can offer a tiered approach. In Tier 1, you could start with simple drawing projects and hand sewing supplies and cover topics such as pattern making, sewing, finishing, then photographing those final products and presenting them. There are few essential items needed in the classroom to teach fashion in that first tier. Most teachers already have those items, such as table space, sinks, wall space, a drying rack, storage. It might be a little unusual to have storage for rolls of fabric and thread racks if you don't teach fashion already. Sewing bins, another item that you would want to add if you don't have that in your traditional class. And those bins would include the basics for hand sewing or machine sewing. And then there's some additional items that would fit more into the Tier 2 and more of the advanced work that could be done. And those could include dressmaker dummies. You might have use of a refrigerator, a light table, access to a washer and dryer, and sewing machines that you might be able to find through donations, or there could even be some used ones from a retired face class. And there's other specialized equipment, which I will cover very soon in a couple slides. So next slide, please. Tony, could we have the next? Thank you. Textiles are made by weaving together fibers with looms, knitting needles, and/or crochet tools. Now you could probably easily get these supplies. Modern dyeing methods create fabrics of almost any color or pattern imaginable. Patterns are made by weaving together fibers of differing colors, bleaching to create a faded white look, stitching colored yarn through existing fabric, the use of resist dyeing, and printing onto finished fabric. These are techniques that can be modified very easily in the classroom. This slide shows knitting, crocheting, and various fabrics made with plant and animal matter or through synthetic means, along with some basic hand tools that you would want.
Webinar online now with a bunch of people.
Next one, please. Next, thank you. Now, one of the most exciting recent developments in education has been the advent of the maker culture. Maker education is done in a student-centered environment. It's a paradigm shift that harkens back to earlier times with industrial arts and home economics, but with a new twist in using new technologies, allowing informal learning to take place and fostering creative thinking to produce new things rather than using templates to create something. The equipment that would be of great use to a fashion program may be in your classroom or in a maker space. Here's some of the specialized equipment that would be in the most advanced third tier of a fashion program. Things like 3D printers, knitting machine, laser cutter, embroidery machine, and a body scanner. Now that is a very brief overview of some basics to advanced items that you would need. Now we're going to talk about unconventional materials, and Terry will take over.
Thanks, Robin. So one thing we know is that fashion evolves, and so does our need to solve some contemporary everyday fashion problems. The idea of creating unconventional fashion using everyday common materials was really born out of considering some of the circumstances under which fashion can become a form of wearable art. So while conventional fashion articles were designed to be mass produced, unconventional fashion uses materials that are created for other reasons, not originally intended to be part of clothing. These fashion items can be extremely labor intensive and they evolve into unique objects, and our book kind of takes you on a journey through the history behind some of these unique fashion statements and innovations. One of the things that we looked at was the history of the history of fashion and as an unconventional fashion. Having a little bit of problems here with my Okay, and an overview of that history of clothing shows us the very distinct reasons as to why fashion has been and continues to be created from unconventional materials and tools. So sometime during the 1960s, the House of Courage used vinyl materials to create, which they used originally for flooring and house siding, to create the famous two-piece suit that Courage came up with that Jackie Kennedy wore. And Paco Rabanne used plastic and plexiglass for his costumes in his 1968 movie Barbarella. Unconventional fashion can move the fashion scene in new directions with some unexpected ideas exposing students to beauty and aesthetics. The complex mixture of social, psychological, and aesthetic factors determines the specific expressions of a different era. In some of the fashion articles that are coming from the use of these unconventional materials may not always be wearable, and their purpose might only be used for art or for exhibit. But by giving students opportunities to make choices when using these unconventional materials to create fashion items is really paramount to their success. So you can start this project by introducing students to artists like Nick Cave, who used uncommon materials and discussed the artistic process behind each of their past projects. One way to do this is to provide online videos or physical demonstrations on how to create some of these materials using tools needed with these. The aesthetics within this particular fashion movement have found practical ways to use existing materials. So for instance, when Salvador Ferragamo was unable to procure steel for the shanks of his shoes, he replaced them with cork wedges, and an industry for the wedge sandal was born. Some of the fashion statements that we now have in our society are meant to make that statement. They are meant to create shock or to be worn as a form of protest, and artistic and social movements have found to have a profound effect on fashion. Some items are meant to make a statement, and one artist who created unconventional fashion in this form was Nick Cave. Cave found inspiration in everything from rocket missiles to tree roots. He used beading, synthetic furs, and found materials that produce sound with movement to his wearable artworks called sound suits. His unconventional works of art have inspired other traditional fashion designers such as Louis Vuitton, Giorgio Armani, and Michael Kors to create bold and fashionable items. This type of forward thinking is found in works of art, like such as fashion statements and fashion innovations. Lady Gaga on the picture here wore a dress made from meat. I don't know if anybody recalls that, but it created quite a stir when she walked into the MTV Video Music Awards back in 2010. And she was condemned by animal rights activists, but she was also named Time Magazine's Fashion Statement of the Year. Can I have the next slide, please? So in creating, students want to create fashion using some of these unconventionals or repurposed materials to create cutting edge designs or fashion as art. And they need to look outside the fashion industry for that, inspiration. Researching and keeping up with contemporary artists have an opportunity to provide students with the new information that they need, and it also allows them to use visual culture shows like Project Runway and the latest developments in technology and culture street style to help them push their designs into new directions. Histories and styles from the past can also influence updated contemporary designs. And the more students can explore their own interests, influences, and point of view, the more that student will develop and refine personal projects. So in a classroom setup for unconventional materials, it's best to create stations around the classroom that students can use the equipment safely and efficiently. You don't need a lot of space to set up these stations, but you do need a lot of electrical outlets. So for instance, you need stations that can have glue guns. These should always be equipped with wooden boards to allow students to allow the glue guns to not drip all over the place when they're not in use, and have that happen on the tables and counters. You also need ironing stations, so you should always cover the ironing board with a heavy white muslin fabric that allows for easy ironing of unconventional materials such as wax paper, which I've used in a lot of my assignments. And then cutting stations. These areas need to be large and include scissors and cutting tools that can be used for materials such as plastic and paper, so that they don't ruin fabric scissors and other things that are meant for that. Can I have the next slide, please? So the artistic process for using different materials and tools is not typically associated with traditional fashion items, and it can be a little more challenging. One of the things you want to do is to acknowledge in the classroom that students need to problem solve throughout their design process. Design process is an opportunity for them to develop their ideas and engage in hands-on experiences through project-based learning. And this design process includes ideation, it includes experimentation, and then it includes refining of ideas when you realize that something didn't work the way you thought it would. So this dress on the right here, and I don't know if you can see it, there might be people blocking that, but the dress on the right, I created out of paper plates. I had this idea to create fashion out of trash. It's a movement that's now very well known as trashin, and the paper plate dress I created was part of a trashin exhibit that I did for my own research. And it included a paper plate dress that I used, that I created out of garbage from my own house. I noticed that my son and husband were using a lot of paper plates when they were make their lunches or breakfasts. And so I thought, well, okay, what can I do to make something that's going to be extremely innovative and different from what we normally do? So I started by creating a basic sketch for the design, and I fashioned the plates into three-dimensional flowers. The paper plates were also used to create the bustier-like bodice. Once I got into making the dress, I encountered several obstacles, which included the A-line skirt. I realized that the weight of the paper plate flowers was too much for the structure that I had built. It was originally supposed to be a much wider structure. So I had to experiment a lot in order to come up with the paper plate dress as you see it today. So giving students the necessary tools, equipment, and materials to create innovative fashion, and especially from uncommon items such as these things that we've shown you today requires a lot of trial and error, and providing an environment where students can become proactive risk takers and help to design lessons that encourage their creative artistic process are important steps to achieve those successful results with their projects. So we're off to Gretchen, who's going to talk more about the lesson planning that she did.
Okay, as Christy said before, I'm an art teacher that teaches fashion. And to be honest with you, I don't have much of what Robin said you needed for a fashion classroom. If you have a classroom with paper and pencil, you can do a fashion project or have a fashion class. So the first thing I want to talk about is figure drawing. When I start my fashion class, I always start with how to draw a fashion figure. I think a lot of the kids sign up for the class not realizing that figure drawing is involved, but in order to draw the clothing, you really do need to be able to draw the figure to put the clothing on. So I'm always looking for ways to maximize a limited amount of figure drawing. And one of the things I have found works really well is paper dolls, because you draw one figure and then you have multiple outfits that you design for that figure to wear. So typically we will start with a figure that is wearing either underwear or a bathing suit. And then I give them a list of outfits to design. So the one we're looking at right now, you can see that the doll is on the left. And the outfits that the student designed were a fancy outfit, a casual outfit, a costume, and a historical outfit. I have the kids research a particular culture or a period of time that they're interested in, and incorporate some of the things they learned about that time period into an outfit for their paper doll. And like I said before, this is a project where you have one figure and multiple outfits. So it really does maximize the figure drawing. So they can do a lot with just one figure. And this project was just done with colored pencils. So paper and colored pencils and some scissors to cut out were really all that was needed for this project. And like Robin said before, all of the projects I'm going to talk about have step-by-step lesson plans in the book. So if you're interested, it's all in the book. But this particular project, it was done for an art class, but it could also be used easily in, say, an English class if you were talking about costuming for a book or for a play. It could be used in a history class to see the progression of fashion throughout time, or how upper class people dressed as opposed to lower class people during a particular time period. So this could be used in a variety of different classrooms. Okay, next slide. All right, the next thing I want to talk about are duct tape bags. Typically I call them duct tape purses, but I do have boys that take my fashion class, and obviously they would rather make a bag than a purse. This would fall into the unconventional materials category because, again, it's using duct tape, which is not typically something that you would associate with fashion. I find that lots of kids have played around with duct tape, so they come into this with a little bit of experience, and it's usually pretty exciting for them to do something they have a little bit of experience with. So when I start a bag lesson, there's some engineering that has to happen because they need to be able to physically make a three-dimensional object. So what I start with is having them do some sketches, and then we construct the bag out of drawing paper. Duct tape, if you've ever purchased it, can be kind of pricey. So I want to make sure that they really understand what they're getting themselves into before they start ripping into the duct tape. Before we do the bags, I have to say that we'll do a wallet project so that the kids can figure out how the duct tape works, how sticky it is, maybe some tricks. Over the years, I've learned that if you put a little lotion on scissors, it keeps the duct tape from sticking to the scissors. And I've got a bunch of other tips in the book as to how to work with duct tape and be a little bit more successful. But anyway, back to purses. So once we have the purse constructed out of just drawing paper and masking tape, that way the kids can make sure that their idea is going to work. It can actually form a three-dimensional bag. Then we cut it apart just enough so that the whole thing will lay flat. Not so that it's all in pieces again, but so the whole thing lays flat. And that's when we start to cover it with duct tape. Typically, I will provide plain duct tape for the kids and allow them to bring in pattern duct tape if they're interested in using that. Now on the pictures on this slide, the one on the left, and I know it's a little bit hard to tell, that particular bag, the student did her paper template out of paper and then went back over the paper with watercolor. And there's a very faint watercolor design. And then she went over it with clear duct tape so that all that hand painting showed through. So there's a lot of room for creativity in these bags. The one on the right it's more of a backpack, and that student figured out how to engineer a duct tape tassel. So I find that, especially when I start working with something that I'm not overly familiar with, the kids will find a million ways to make it better. They'll find lots of tricks, and they'll engineer things that I never thought were possible. Okay, next slide. And the last thing I want to talk about with you is hand sewing. I do not have access to sewing machines in my classroom, so we do hand sewing. I think figure drawing and sewing are very important for any fashion class. One thing I will tell you, if you're going to do a fashion class and you're interested in this, ask around in your community, in your school system for donations. I get a lot of people telling me that they're cleaning out their mom's old sewing room and can I use her thread and her scissors and her pins and her needles? Yes, there's a lot of that stuff out there because not a lot of people know how to sew. There's a lot of that stuff out there that people are looking to donate. So if you're interested, be on the lookout for that. These felt pendants are made out of just store-bought felt squares. I typically show the kids how to make what you see here and allow them to go their own way if they're interested. When we start this, we talk about several different stitching techniques. I teach them how to do blanket stitch, a running stitch, a beading stitch, and how to make French knots. And when we talk about making a pendant, as long as they can show all 4 of those stitches on their pendant, they're free to do whatever they want. This particular student kind of followed what my plan was in just using little circles and flowers, because that is something that will give you the opportunity to use all of those stitches. One thing I will say is that when I have made these in the past, I have learned over time that the felt is so light that if you don't put a lot of beads on it like this student, you have a problem with the pendant kind of blowing off in the wind because it's so light. So I have found that putting a nickel inside of each pendant keeps them weighted down and you can wear them appropriately. They don't move up your neck weirdly. But again, when I'm teaching fashion, the things that I find that are most important are teaching them how to draw a fashion figure and how to do some hand stitching. A lot of kids have never been asked to do any stitching. They don't really have a background in that, and they're more than willing to learn how to do these simple things. Now I think we're on to Margie.
Hey everybody, I'm Margie Wahoviak, and you know, I've been fortunate enough to have been involved with fashion my entire life. All my life, I played with fashion, I played with paper dolls, like Gretchen was talking about, and I ended up studying design, and then I went on with a career, and now I'm an educator. And fashion has a lot of different elements. Fashion can be considered walking art. It tells a story. If you look at the fashion timeline right here on the slide, you can see what people wore at a certain period of time. And those clothes absolutely reflect the changes in the culture of the time. Now, fashion is fun, fashion is exciting, but it's also a global business that employs millions, if not trillions, of people in the entire world. Teaching fashion can be a launch pad to many skills and career opportunities. It involves problem solving and allows students to develop a sense of their own personal style. Next slide, please. Year after year, fashion designers use the elements of art and principles of design to create new items of clothing consumers see on the runways and then later in the stores. So all of you are familiar with the elements of art and the principles of design. Fashion relies on the understanding of these elements and principles and applying them in the development of fashion products. In fashion, we use something called observational research. Well, you know what? We all do that. We look at what's going on around us. Take these 2 images that we're sharing from the book. What do you see in that first image? You see lines, shape, form, color. So all of these are examples that students can look for in either magazines, online, and who doesn't like to look at pictures? Come on. I mean, look at Instagram, Facebook, you name it. So whatever outlet you would like for them to create a lookbook or gather this information, this can be a great tool to have students begin to hone in on their observational research abilities, and then this helps them to apply it to the design elements and principles. So next slide, please. Color. What about color? Every one of us reacts to color. Color has the power to excite. It elicits an emotional reaction within each of us. Understanding color and the color relationships is a key design element. Color has always been a key driver in fashion newness. And today I happen to be watching a webinar about what new fashion trends are going to be emerging. Believe it or not, after all of this ends, and they're really predicting that bright colors are going to have a huge emphasis because people are going to want that excitement. So on the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see some activities where we have, that are included in the book that allow students to use color in order to understand the relationship of colors. So the first activity is basically very simple. All you need is a color wheel and some magazines and some glue and some paper, and put it all together and create a color wheel collage. The second activity involves coloring in these line drawings. These line drawings in the fashion business are called fashion croquis. This particular activity asks students to come up with harmonious relationships between color, to use monochromatic or complementary. I always allow the students to use a wild card. They can make one figure anything they want to be, and that gives them that, empowerment of being in charge. So both of these activities will be included in the handout that you'll be receiving after the webinar. Next slide, please. So there is a process involved in the fashion design, and we discuss the fashion process throughout this book. Fashion design, the process is the same as what Terry explained, what Robin talked about. Basically, it starts with an idea, a concept, a vision. And from there, you need to communicate that idea, you need to refine it, experiment with it, and then ultimately you put it into production. This particular activity that is being shown here is an example of an activity that we have done at the Kent State Fashion Summer Academy and has also been modified for use in middle school summer programs. And this process doesn't just involve fashion. It can be automobiles, it could be homeware, it could be numerous things. It all involves the design process. Next slide, please. So personal style, though, we all have our own personal style. And style is a distinctive appearance and combination of unique features that creates a look. And fashion choices are certainly individual. Outfits that we put together, that students put together, are unique. And they're often meant to express our individual choices or statements we are making. These two activities are really all about creating self-awareness. So within personal style, what's really key to having your own personal style is having a keen sense of self-awareness. And last slide, or I don't know if it's the last one, but next slide. So let's talk about careers. The fashion industry offers a multitude of career destinations and employment options for people who love fashion. Careers in this business, it's an extremely dynamic business. It's fun, it's exciting. It doesn't sit still for long. But also, it's much more than a buyer or a designer. There's so many people involved in bringing fashion to the consumer. We have textiles, we have color, trend forecasters, pattern makers, production people, logistics. I mean, we got to get the product from door to door. There is so many opportunities within this trillion-dollar global business. So teaching fashion offers students an opportunity to explore design, business, consumer behavior, and a lot more. But probably the best part about fashion is it's a lot of fun. You can have a lot of fun teaching fashion. Next slide. Oh, well, those were together. So basically, this one right here, what you're looking at here is the process. Plan and research to distribute. I just want to make sure it's not a linear. It actually is, a cycle, because once you distribute and you have your product on the floor, you have to decide, you read your numbers. Did the customer buy it? And then you have to plan and research for the future. What you have to the right side of the slides, this is an example of design within a mass distribution company. Next slide, please. And here within, I believe within the handout, we're also including all the different careers, the industries, the roles, and who they work with. So as you can see, there are many, many different options within the fashion industry. So thank you, and that's all I have for now. I don't know who goes next, but thank you very much.
Oh, Robin, we just need you to unmute.
That was the second time. You'd think I would have learned. So I wanted to say that we're so appreciative that you joined us. As you can imagine, we had a great time writing this book and putting this together. And I want to tell you a little side story. When we had our little celebration through Zoom of when this book actually was published, Gretchen said to me, now Gretchen, a few years ago, was one of my graduate students, and she did a fantastic project that involved a self-portrait paper doll. And she said she recently found that project and it had a picture on it of her son. Now at the time, that's really what kind of kicked this off. When she did that project, she and I started talking about the potential to create a book that we thought people would really enjoy having and would be so useful in the classroom. Now back to the present day, when she found that project and saw that photo, it was a picture of her son who was a toddler at the time. And he's about to turn 15. So this has been a long-term project for all of us, but we've really had a great time. So the activities in this book have been taught by educators, many that are on this call, to middle school, high school, and university students. The project-based activities may be easily adapted to many levels. It was our intention to create a book that will guide you toward developing either a basic program, a one-semester course, or even just a single lesson. So as you can see here, the different chapters and chapter topics in our table of contents, and we just briefly touched on a little bit from each of these chapters. And you saw some of the images that were in the book. They're really great images, and we're so appreciative to all the contributors of those images. So now Christy's going to explain how to win a free copy of the book. Yay! And then we will welcome your questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. We are so excited about this book, and we would love to give away a free one. So if you would share with us your favorite fashion lesson, just please tag us on social media. You can see the various Davis tags there at the bottom of the screen. And if you can share your favorite fashion lesson with us by Friday, May 22nd at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll enter you in a drawing to win a copy of Fashion Fundamentals, the book. And of course, if you would like to purchase the book, it is available at davisart.com. And we did have a couple of questions about the book specifically, and you answered one of them about inspiration. We had another one about how long the process was for writing the book, which you kind of hinted at, but also were there any challenges that you faced along the way?
Well, as I said, it took us about, what Gretchen was, about 13 years to get the book from initial ideas to print. And some of the challenges that we encountered basically were kind of who to include, how much did we want to have represented in this book? And it just was my good fortune, especially to meet Terry through the National Art Education Association and Margie at a College of the Arts meeting that we had. And she and I sat next to each other. And so in just kind of personal conversations, it just seemed like the four of us would be such a good fit to put this together. So it took a while to kind of find each other. So I guess that would have been one of the challenges. And then to kind of hone in on exactly what we wanted to say.
And this question is for any of the panelists who would like to answer. We have a couple of people are asking questions about, I think especially now, given all that's going on, what are the key points, or how would you advocate for including fashion in an art program?
If we want to take a look at some of the questions also that relate to this, one person had a really great question about the need to teach high school students fashion, especially in a pandemic. And I think this book is not just about teaching fashion, but it's really about teaching and cultivating creativity using fashion items. And I think history has shown that with every challenge the humankind has, that that new industries and ideas have emerged from these challenges. So I think within fashion, we're going to start to see some really interesting things happen that will be a result of this pandemic. For instance, I don't know if anybody has seen Air Asia's new flight attendants uniforms. Has anybody seen that among the author group? They're actually quite clever because they are a full-blown hazmat suit. And so I think, as we navigate this new normal, I think we're going to start to see fashion play a major part in how we keep ourselves safe from others and with social distancing. And even, I've seen face masks that have spirit wear, and, universities are embracing it, and fashion items have been used. I saw one shirt that they actually incorporated the face mask into it. You just pulled it up and put it on. So I think that there's some really innovative things. And going back to your question about why teach fashion in the schools, because I think this is going to be a huge industry that's going to really have positive outcomes from having more knowledge about fashion and how we can use it to keep ourselves safe.
I think too, fashion is always on the student's mind. It's a way to get in there because they're thinking about fashion. They're working within the fashion system, getting themselves ready and presentable for school every day. It's just a way to connect with students, I think.
I just want to add that fashion often, fashion is very much misunderstood in that, yes, oh, we're fashion, or a fashion model, or fashion clothes, but it's so much more than that. It's, Terry talked about it, it's problem solving. How do we create, and just look at the wearable fashion that has evolved within the last 5-10 years. So I think fashion is part of our lives. Unfortunately, it has the stigma of not being as important as maybe engineering or something. But Gretchen had to teach those kids how to engineer those duct tape bags. That's problem solving. So it is an uphill battle, but underlying the skills and just being really persistent about it, I think that's, I mean, most of you, Gretchen, you had to fight, I'm sure, but your enrollment is good, right? I mean, isn't that what it's all about? And so, you know, students come out, do they end up going to fashion school? Probably not, but, you know, most of them end up, you know, at least identifying something, that a direction they want to go in. It's trial and error. I mean, they're trying to figure out what their life's purpose is.
Let's see. Do you have any suggestions for inner city schools specifically?
Well,
Go ahead, Robin.
okay. I mentioned the different tiers that you could start very basically, like Gretchen mentioned, pencil and paper. So inner city schools don't necessarily have to have low budgets. I think fairly typically they do, however. And so you can do a great deal. And I thought the paper doll lesson that Gretchen showed just indicated how creative you can get with just, you know, very basic supplies, including some markers. So those kinds of things, and also upcycling, using old clothing that you could get from Goodwill or just have donated, and you can take those apart and put them together in different ways for new fashion statements. I think students really enjoy doing that kind of thing. So those are my first thoughts. I'm sure the others have more. Or not.
We do have a question for Gretchen.
Oh.
With the paper dolls, how long do you give the students? About how long does that take?
We spend a couple days on the planning, you know, what their outfits are going to look like. Typically, I'll ask them to do the research for their history doll as a homework assignment. That's easy enough for them to do outside of class. We'll spend a couple days on figure drawing. So they have, when we go to make the doll, they'll have several options of figures to choose from, so they can choose their best. I always tell the kids, your first solution might not be your best solution. Let's have 3 or 5 solutions, and then you choose your best one. I don't want them to be stuck with something that's maybe not their best work and have to work with it through the whole thing. So that usually takes a couple days. And then I would say maybe a day or 2 for each outfit. And then we have to cut them out and add the tabs on. So, and that might take half a class. I don't know. I would say maybe 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. And how
And
long?
that depends on how long your classes are. My classes are about 45 minutes every day.
Great. What are some ways you've displayed students' fashion designs?
I've displayed a number of ways. Within both the Fashion Summer Academy and the Fashion middle school programs that I've been involved with, we have a fashion show, and basically they show their upcycled garments in the fashion show. In the middle school, since we didn't have access to a space for a fashion show, we did a photo shoot. Oh my God, can you imagine a bunch of, I mean, they loved it. And did I have to have a professional photographer? No, I had plenty of professionals in that group of middle schoolers. So those were 2 ways with the outfits. As far as a lot of the other work, it can be easily displayed on bulletin boards, or after the summer middle school program that I do here, I also posted it all on Google and gave the parents a link to all the work. So I think there's many ways that we can display the work. And I think with everything that's going on right now, we're going to find even more innovative ways to share the works. Just look at what's going on with fashion shows and the way a lot of the colleges are showing their portfolios at the end of the year. We're going to see a lot of different, you know, creative ways to display artwork, fashion, all kinds of things.
And to add to that, I use blogs to have my students showcase their work, and that way students can actually comment on other people's works of art or fashion items. I know that there's actually a fashion blog called Fashion Matters, because that was one of the titles that we looked into for this book, but it was already taken by a fashion blog. So I think that blogs are a very useful way of displaying student work, and also getting students to engage in open and meaningful dialogue and critique with each other.
Well, we don't want to forget the traditional runway approach if we're ever back to face-to-face. Students love to wear their creations and then do some kind of runway show off or show and tell kind of thing. And that's when you can bring families in and other guests to really kind of do some PR for the program, for your fashion program. So that's a fun thing that a lot of teachers I know include. So.
And you could also dovetail a fashion show right into a talent show as well, too.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Christy, there's a question on here about teaching costume design and construction that a teacher has in a high school, and wanted to know whether this book could be adapted to this. And just so you know, I think that is absolutely wonderful, because my background, I was a high school teacher, and I also did an MFA program at Northwestern in costume design and construction. And I honestly think that this is a way to get boys interested in fashion, because you can implement these assignments into theater projects. And I think that that's outstanding that you have a high school that actually promotes costume design, theater, construction, because I think that that's another form of career choices that people don't really think about in the fashion industry, that there's a lot out there right now. And as Robin said, if we ever get back to the old normal.
Okay, we do have some questions about the elementary level. Do you have any suggestions for how to bring fashion design to the elementary classroom, or in an art club kind of situation?
You could do tennis shoe designs, you could do t-shirt designs. I mean, all those things would be very easy to do with little kids. Even if you gave them a template and had them design, just with crayons or colored pencils, or you could go so far as to actually start to have them work on altering a t-shirt, or painting onto a t-shirt, painting onto shoes. Those kind of things would be very easy to do with an elementary school class.
Many of the projects that are in the book have already been adapted to middle school. So this was fourth graders. It was 4 through 7 that attend the summer middle school camp. And all of like I said, a lot of these projects are easy to adapt, but certainly t-shirts are always on trend. There's always the new trends happening on YouTube on how to cut it up, or, when we were doing off the shoulder as a trend 2 years ago, all you had to do was cut the shoulder. I mean, and there were 20 million examples on YouTube. I mean, so much is available to us. We just have to start with an idea and sort of go with it.
I have a picture I'm going to try to hold up so everybody can see, because this was sent to me from a friend, and it's I think it's a 5-year-old niece that made her own mask for right now. So that's definitely a fashion statement. So we can even do quite a bit even while we are kind of under lockdown.
Is there a discussion of sustainability within fashion as part of the book? For example, using trash-in or other projects?
There is, because if you go into the unconventional materials, where that's where one of the places where my dress is actually. And as I mentioned, I did a trash and show, an exhibit. If you look up trash and there are so many exhibits right now that you can have your students get involved in, which have enormous monetary awards that are available to students. So I highly encourage people to Google that particular genre of fashion. There's one show in Australia that's larger than life, and I think the award is $50,000. So sustainability is something that's here to stay. Back in the 2010, I taught an interior design class in high school where we talked about using blue jeans that we use this process from our wood shop where we shredded them and we actually made insulation to go into housing. And that was a big trend back at the end of that decade where people were using blue jeans as insulation and housing. So sustainability, there's a lot of different ways to go that route. But I think trash-in is really exciting because as art teachers, trash-in is a form of wearable art. And there you can do so much with it because we have trash every day, right?
Mm-hmm. I think we also talk about upcycling in the book. And one of the lessons that I did not talk about was using old wool sweaters and felting them and using them to create a purse. So there's some upcycling of that in the book as well.
Okay. A lot of teachers are trying to fit their classes for online learning, as I'm sure you all know at this point, and you probably are as well. Do you have any recommendations for teaching fashion over online platforms, or are there any good techniques or apps that you've come across that would be ideal for teaching this kind of way?
Well, I have just spent the last 10 weeks teaching fashion online. This time I was lucky enough to have started it in the classroom, so that made it much easier. Most of the things that we've been doing, I've been trying to go back and forth between figure drawing lessons and non-figure drawing lessons. And I usually try and do that in my classroom as well, because I know the kids really get burnt out on figure drawing. So we may spend a project doing like paper dolls, and then we might do a bag project. So we're kind of going back and forth between more illustration and more construction. So some of the things that we've done online is I went onto YouTube, and as Robin was saying before, I found a bunch of videos on how to alter t-shirts. Because one of the things I'm struggling with as a teacher is when we sent our students home, we sent them home for 2 weeks. We didn't realize that we were not going to see them again. So my students have no supplies. So not only am I teaching online, I'm teaching online to kids who have no supplies. Right. So I think everyone can either has or can find a t-shirt that they don't necessarily wear anymore. So we spent some time doing an altered t-shirt where they cut into it and changed it that way. We did sew masks. We talked about upcycling fabric as well. You can cut apart a t-shirt to get the square of fabric you need to make the mask. So those are some of the things that I've been doing online, and figure drawing as well. I'll give them a topic each. When we do a figure drawing assignment for the week, I give them a topic. Draw an outfit that you think will be wearable in 100 years, and what will be the impacts in 100 years that will cause the fashion to look like this. For instance, environmental factors, health factors, financial factors. How is that influencing the outfit that you've created? So those are the kind of things I've been doing online these past 10 weeks.
And also, I think, as Gretchen mentioned, it is really challenging to deal with coming up with lessons when you know your students don't have supplies at home. The same thing happened at WVU. We sent our students home, it gave them an extended spring break and thought that they would come back after that. So it became extremely difficult to think of ways to continue the semester when students didn't have printmaking facilities or photography facilities or whatever. But one of the things that has come from this, again, is some new ideas that my student teachers who were out in the field came up with, creating incredible lessons that used things that they found from nature. I had one student who went to Kroger's, bought a jar of instant coffee and did value paintings using coffee. I had another student who created tempera paint from egg yolks, and that's how Da Vinci did it back in the 15th century. So there are things that you can do. You just need to be, again, going back to creativity, you just need to be creative and coming up with ways to help your students problem solve, to help them figure out ways to do what it is that they need to get done project wise. So So there are a lot of different things. That will be our next book.
Yeah, right. And certainly the activities are the most fun things, and I'm sure that's what you're looking for. But I will mention that there are also a lot of virtual tours in fashion museums or museums that have a fashion collection, just part of it or something that you also could use and critique and discuss and talk about how the fashion relates to the culture of the time, and and it can be broadened beyond that. But that's a nice resource that's available to all of us right now.
And one of the things that I'm just absolutely amazed at is when I see these students on TV talking about something that they did and how they're a part of this history. Because honestly, to think of it that way is such a positive spin on this. A lot of people are really struggling with being cooped up in their houses, but then you see these high school students who said, well, here's what we did. We had nothing, and we created these beautiful chalk paintings outside. And again, it seems like art and music have really stepped up and created some amazing things that are part of, as these students saying, history that nobody before them went through. So
Yes. Wonderful. All right. Well, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. And I want to take a moment to remind everyone that Davis has lots of great resources for you to access and share with your teachers you work with. If you head over to davisart.com/free resources, you'll be able to sign up for weekly webinars, for free access to the Davis digital platform, access to free professional development sessions, School Arts Magazine online, and view some of our on-demand video lessons. The weekly webinars we have next week, art teachers discussing how to teach with contemporary art at the elementary level. Our panel of teachers will provide lots of applicable tips for any art teacher wanting to add more contemporary art to their teaching. Later in the series, we'll hear from experts on photography, mindfulness, and making murals. So please, again, head over to davisart.com/free resources for all of that. And I also want to mention an exhibition opportunity we have for art teachers. School Arts Magazine and the Frank Juarez Gallery are hosting an exhibit for art teachers called Pushing the Envelope, a Mail Art Gallery Show. All you have to do is create a small piece of artwork, one that can be mailed in a standard 4x6 envelope and sent via the US Postal Service to Frank Juarez by July 24th. So you've got plenty of time. The works will be featured in an online exhibition. A selection will be featured in the November issue of School Arts Magazine, and the collection will be shown at NHS Artifacts Gallery at Sheboygan North High School in Wisconsin. We hope that you will consider making something fun for this exhibit. I want to give a big special thanks to our panel of fashion experts. We really appreciate you taking the time to share with us this afternoon and for creating this wonderful book as a resource for everyone. And thank you to all our participants who have joined us today. We hope you found this session inspiring. We're going to stop recording now, but we'll stay on for just a few minutes longer to answer any burning questions that you may have left. We hope you all stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you, everyone.